The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thanks for joining the webinar today. My name is Matthew Eshleman, and we will get started in just a minute. Great, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for attending today. We will be talking about reports and reflections from the most recent NTEN conference, and let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Matthew Eshleman. I am the Chief Technology Officer here at Community IT, and I've been with the company for full-time for a little over 16 years. And during my time here at Community IT, I've played nearly every technical role from desktop support to managing and directing our strategy related to our clients' IT infrastructure solutions and those tools that we use to manage over 4,300 endpoints at our nearly 120 nonprofit clients. So last couple of years, that's really been had a growing focus on IT security and specific as it relates to the nonprofit sector. So I'm really excited to be joining you today. The session will be recorded and the slides available on our SlideShare and YouTube channel. And also, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and chat those in. So a little bit more about Community IT. So since 1993, Community IT has been providing supporting nonprofits and advancing their mission through the effective use of technology. And Community IT is a 100% employee-owned company, and we're also recognized as one of the top 500 MSPs in the United States, according to MSP Mentor magazine. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I just returned last Friday from New Orleans, where I attended 18 NTC. I'm not sure if this was the 18th nonprofit NTC conference or something thereabouts, but this was actually the 10th time that I have attended this conference and really enjoyed it. Again, it's always a great time and a chance to connect. So I just want to go ahead and do a little poll here that should pop up on your screen. We'll get a little bit of audience participation to see if you all have attended the NTC or if you are getting some information here about the first time. So again, just give everybody a chance to check in here. And let's see. So it looks like no, not many. The people in the audience today didn't get a chance to attend NTC, so you are in the right place. So great. I'll hopefully be able to share a little bit of what I found and some of the things that I found really great about the NTC conference. So a little bit, some of the statistics here. So this year's conference, NTC has tended to be around the 2,000 mark, so there were about over 1,800 attendees. What I thought was really interesting was that there were a little over 1,300 first-time attendees, so there was a lot of great energy from all the new folks, and then there were 71 folks that were in the category that I am, where they took the had been there for more than 10 sessions. So I know it feels like I knew maybe all 71 of those folks, but it was a really good chance to get to connect with people. And then there were over 130 sessions over the, essentially 2.5 days of the conference. So Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So that was a little bit about the demographics of the conference. It started off with a keynote of the session here. So the keynote speaker that they've had this year was Livia Jaye. I apologize if I butcher the name there. So she actually, the interesting story that she told was she was actually has been involved in the NTC community for quite a while, and was actually a speaker and had attended, kind of as early as I think 2009. And so, the topic of her talk was, she's a 15-year overnight success story. So she's a blogger, an author. And has 200,000 Twitter followers, and kind of has a big impact kind of in the social media space. And so she talked a lot about how she built her online community and really took advantage of kind of the online tools that really helped her build that network where she feels engaged with with all those folks. So I think it was a great kind of example to see somebody that was sitting in the audience maybe 10 or 12 years ago and is now up on stage speaking to audiences such as NTEN with 2,000 attendees, and she had her pictures with Oprah and kind of all the big celebrities. So I think it was a kind of a good and inspiring tale of kind of what can happen for folks that really work hard and are focused on building up their personal brand and identity there. So I think it was really well received, and she did a great job of interacting with the audience. She also had a recent book that was published, and I know a lot of folks had kind of done a book study as part of the ramp up into the conference. So that was kind of everybody I think was really engaged with her as a speaker. So the conference itself was at the Convention Center in New Orleans, along with a couple of other conferences. So a really huge space, although I felt the conference was pretty nice and compact. There were 3 floors and then the vendor hall. So everything was kind of up, stacked in a line. And, the weather was great. And I think everybody was really excited to be down in New Orleans to have some great weather. Many people that I talked to, I think when I left Baltimore, it was, 35 degrees. Everybody I met from Michigan or Minnesota had basically left snow, and then we landed in New Orleans, and the weather was great. The trees were blooming. There were flowers. It smelled good. It was it was a great shift of pace from wherever folks were coming from. So a really I think a really great venue, and I think yeah, I mean New Orleans as a city. Was people were very excited to be there, and it overlapped a little bit with French Quarter Festival. So I think the pace of NTEN was great to allow folks to also get a chance to get out and explore the city and not be cooped up in a convention center or a hotel all day. So of the 130 some sessions that were out there, I went to a number of sessions. There were sessions on blockchain. I presented on email encryption. There's a session on cybersecurity, a session on IT planning, a session on the cloud, and then a really great session that I attended on process improvement. And one of the things that I tend to want to do whenever I go to these conventions or conferences is, yeah, I mean, take the stuff that is meaningful and directly relevant to kind of your day-to-day job, but then also throw in a wildcard session. So and for me that was the process improvement session, which was actually I think the last session that I attended on Friday before leaving, and that was actually a really fantastic and well done session. And I'll share a little bit more in detail about that here as we go through the slides. So yeah, once again, if you got any questions, go ahead and chat those in, and I will answer some questions. And if you submitted a question in advance, I'll pick that up at the end. So, I feel like in this day and age, in this time, you probably can't go to a tech conference without talking about blockchain and kind of what it is. So this session, I have the links that are up here. NTC is really good about making collaborative notes and slides available. So if you follow the links here, you'll get the actual content for the slide. So this was a session that was done about blockchain by some folks associated with TechSoup, and I thought it was a really well done session. Marnie Webb who was with TechSoup, and then Sheila, who works with, I think, the Global Fund. Anyways, I think they did a great job of kind of talking about blockchain and specific applications. One of the things that I was surprised to learn in this session is that there are foundation grants that are kind of encouraging the use of blockchain, and so a lot of folks were there being like, "Hey, how can I implement this in my organization? Does this even make sense?" And so the presenters kind of talk through what is blockchain and then some practical applications. So, I think we're all familiar with blockchain and its implementations as a cryptocurrency, which is, I think, the most well-known example. However, there are lots of other kind of applications for blockchain. And so blockchain fundamentally is has these attributes. So it's functionally a distributed database. It supports peer-to-peer transmission, and so that's really the value of blockchain, is this idea of disintermediation. So you don't need an intermediary to facilitate a transaction. It provides transparency with what they call pseudonymity. So the transaction has occurred, but you don't have to necessarily disclose your identity as part of it. There is this idea of irreversibility of records, where it's immutable. So that once a transaction has occurred, that is stored in an immutable format. So you can't kind of go back and erase things. You can change things moving forward, but you kind of can't go back and erase the history of a transaction. And currently, all of this is kind of facilitated through kind of a concept called proof of work, which requires some computational logic. So right now, the most common example of blockchain is to facilitate a transaction. So there's lots of examples, about remittances to foreign countries. And so instead of paying Western Union or somebody 17.5% to facilitate a transaction, that could be done through a blockchain transaction. Does not require that an intermediary like Western Union. You can kind of do it just as peer-to-peer, and as a result, there's a lot less friction in the transaction. There's a lot less overhead in the transaction, so that more money can go to the recipient. Similarly, there were some examples shared about how blockchain can be used to prove and provide proof for sustainable harvesting practices. So the idea that, okay, we're going to verify and have a certification process to audit that this wood is harvested sustainably. Once that goes to the furniture maker, then all those separate pieces are combined, and so now we have a new unit of value, which is a piece of furniture, and then that transaction can be recorded, made public, and verified by other folks as a way to prove that this in fact is sustainable from the beginning to end. So it's this idea of you can kind of publicly demonstrate that something has occurred. And again, is blockchain going to be the solution in every case? No, certainly not. I mean, in some cases, yeah, maybe you just need a better database. But this concept, I think continues to have interesting applications for how these transactions can occur without needing to have intermediaries involved. So again, it was a good session to get the day started off with, and it was very well attended. And I think it just shows the level of interest there is in this type of session at NTC. And they're great questions, good presenters. I think lots of good content that was shared here. So I'd encourage you to check out the slides and learn a little bit more. I think it's a good place to start. Next topic I'll talk about is around encryption. So I did a presentation with a couple of peers on email encryption specifically, and we talked a lot about the overview of the IT security landscape. Again, if you're interested in that, there's lots and lots of presentations that we've done about the security landscape. We talked about different types of encryption. I think that's a helpful concept for us to all kind of understand. There's lots and lots of different definitions for encryption, where it's applied, who has access, who can decrypt data, who can encrypt data. So we talked a lot about that. Talked about examples of encryption. So I think maybe most of us are familiar with email encryption that's maybe available through our email provider, like Office 365, or maybe we have a third-party add-in like Zix, or maybe using Barracuda or some other solutions where the email is encrypted in transit. The recipient gets a message, they have to kind of log in to read the message, and then they're not able to forward it or do other stuff with it. So that's kind of one type of email encryption. We actually focused on a type of encryption that's been around for a long time, PGP encryption, which stands for pretty good privacy, and that is kind of analogous to blockchain, where it's kind of a disintermediated solution. So PGP really relies on a concept called web of trust, and there's not a central intermediary authority. So, I have my private key, I've published my public key, and you can send me an encrypted message if you also have a private key. So you can use your private key, my public key, send me a message, only I can decrypt it. And there's no central authority that's kind of managing that. And so I think for organizations that have concerns about the risk of those central authorities perhaps being compromised or not providing integrity of that communication, that PGP is a really great solution. So, I still think it's tends to be a specific use case, but I think there are more and more use cases as people want ways to kind of preserve the integrity of their communications and not rely on an intermediary to facilitate that transaction. So. I'd encourage you to check out that session. Also in the session link are very detailed setup guides that are available that walk you through setting up email encryption both in a Mac environment using Mac Mail or in a Windows environment using Thunderbird. So email encryption, I think it's a topic that we'll continue to see more and more. I think it's particularly as people's awareness continues to be raised around issues of privacy and the platforms that they're using and how to ensure your privacy and the security of your data whenever you're using systems that maybe you can't trust entirely. Then we, as I mentioned, went to a session around improving process. And again, I thought this was a great session. The presenters were really kind of engaging and dynamic, and they talked about how when process blocks progress and workflow. So that was kind of the main topic around the session. And I think here the takeaway, it's kind of predicated on the example of defining your mission. So they use the example for what is NTEN's mission, and then had us do some exercises around how we could kind of take the words that were part of the mission, find images that were relevant to us, that describe those images that describe the words or illustrated the words, and then kind of talk to the folks around us. So, to me, it was a good takeaway that, images like integrity or excellence can have different understandings. And so whenever you have somebody share a picture, oh, this is the image that shows excellence to me, it can really highlight the difference between somebody's understanding of what a word means. One of the presenters, shared the example of her work, in working with, IT systems related to the foster care and adoption system. And so the term placement, actually has several different meanings depending on the people involved and depending on the time of the process. And so as you're working on process in your organization, if you're doing some diagramming, kind of mapping things out, this maybe was a good tool to just help get people talking about what they mean whenever they use those certain words. So I thought it was a really helpful session. I think it had everything that was good about NTEN, great presenters, a chance to interact with your fellow session attendees. At the end, then we got to build some stuff with marshmallows and spaghetti and tape. So again, a great example of building something out of those kind of small resources, and everybody had a different prompt. Some people were supposed to make something that was art. Some people were supposed to do something that had movement. Some people that were going to have something that represented protection. And again, one group that had protection kind of put a bunch of, made the spaghetti into a bunch of spikes for their marshmallow. So that was their version of protection. Another group, built a shelter to put the marshmallow in. So again, we say protection. What do we mean? And we mean a sea urchin, or do we mean, a clam? What's our take on how on what we mean by the words that we're using? So again, I think it was a really great session, and I would highly encourage you to take advantage of those looks. So again, session notes for the whole NTC are here. It's in a Google folder, and again, the evaluation link is here, and there's lots of great pictures. So again, I've mentioned it a couple times already, but I think NTC is a great community. It's a great community to be a part of. It's very friendly and kind of open and welcoming, and I think people genuinely have a good time and are happy to be there. So you can take a look at some of those pictures here later. So what's coming up next? So next year, NTC will be in NTEN's hometown of Portland, Oregon. So it's a little bit earlier in the year, so back into March. So it will be in Portland next March. It'll be in Baltimore in 2020. So actually, that's my hometown. I'm very excited to have it here. So NTC or 20 NTC in Baltimore, and then over to Pittsburgh. So it does look like NTC is going to be bouncing around and breaking out of the kind of the traditional DC, San Francisco, somewhere else rhythm, and going into maybe some more interesting and unique cities. So I'm certainly looking forward to Portland next year and Baltimore the year after that. So did want to highlight that we will be having another webinar next in May, and I apologize, I think I have my slides mixed up here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my other slideshow, but there will be a build webinar that's going to be in next May. So our partners at Build Consulting are going to go ahead and do the next webinar. We typically partner with them once a quarter, and they're going to be doing the webinar next month called Development Operations and Technology. And so I encourage you to go ahead and register to talk about that. And let me go ahead and I'll get my additional slides that I have here and go ahead and share that out. So I think the key takeaways from for me for the session are really that NTEN is a great and welcoming community. They kind of continue to grow and provide more resources to their members. One of the things that I certainly appreciate is that if you have a question, just ask. People have good answers, and if the session presenters don't have a good answer, somebody in the audience likely does. So there are a lot of questions in the cloud session, particularly where folks had questions around governance, or how do we handle some specific scenario, like, hey, we've got all these different web apps that my staff use. How do I manage that and keep track of it? And so somebody else in the session provided some options like, hey, maybe looking at a solution like Okta, or maybe your single sign-on solution in Office 365 would be a great way to provide some organizational governance around the solutions that you provide. We want to make sure people have the technology tools they need to be successful, and if they don't, they're going to go kind of find their own way and kind of make things happen. So if we can put in as an IT manager, if you can put in a solution in place that kind of guides your staff along, that's a lot better than either saying no or just not being aware. So again, I think that peer sharing and those examples of creative problem solving is something that's great, and I really appreciate about the community. Improving security is really a key goal. There was a session on cybersecurity. There was I think a pre-conference event on cybersecurity. So I think it does seem like we're finally getting to the place where nonprofits and nonprofit leadership are taking this as a serious threat. And, I know, speaking personally at community IT, I feel like after sponsoring an article 2 years ago around security for nonprofits. We're kind of just now getting to a point where we are responding to requests from IT security for organizations in terms of security assessments or improving security best practices. And so I think we're finally getting there. I think a lot more needs to be done, but improving security is a key goal. And the good thing is that there are simple and basic steps that every organization can take to improve their security. And that really starts. I think there's kind of universal acceptance and recommendation that multi-factor authentication is kind of the thing that everybody needs to be doing. It's moving from a nice to have to a must do. So that would be one thing. I think we heard over and over and over again was that, hey, multi-factor authentication is something that everybody needs to do. And backups, it may sound boring, but hey, that's still a key piece. So but there is an increasing awareness that, hey, we need to not only kind of say that security is important, but also put some investments. I think that being said, I think in the nonprofit community, there's still, sense that, funding and kind of resources in general are still, not where they need to be. And even at the foundation level, there's still a reticence to do that funding for capacity building. Like, there's grants for blockchain, but, there's not grants for, implementing multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. So, I think there still is the sense that, hey, you guys at the foundations have been talking about how we need to be, innovative and make these changes and have all these new, great and exciting ideas. But, in general, we're still, nonprofits in general are still trying to fight for operation funding to make sure that the organizations run efficiently. I went to a session on planning, and there was a CFO for a nonprofit that spoke, and she kind of talked about how she has been able to fund and make kind of smart investments in IT a priority. So she's able to aggregate all the IT spend from all the departments and take a look at it and kind of understand, oh, maybe we had some overlapping expenses. She shared that they were being billed from their IT provider kind of in excess of the agreement on systems that were out of warranty. And so she was able to kind of draw the connections and say, oh, well, hey, instead of like spending a bunch of extra money on supporting this old and outdated equipment, we're going to invest that money in a computer replacement cycle. And, so we're going to, shift from, paying the overhead for expensive old equipment, and we're going to invest in our technology and our people instead. And I think, we find that as well. If organizations can make that shift to being proactive about their IT investments, then the organization as a whole tends to be a lot more effective. So those are, I think, some of the key takeaways that I took from NTC this year. So again, if I think most of the folks that were on the poll earlier had not been to NTC, but if you were and had some other takeaways, I'd go ahead and share. All right, so let's go ahead and spend a little bit of time on the questions. And so the questions we had ahead of time were, in addition to the ones that were chatted in. So one was, I'll go ahead and answer, was how was the food? And I would say the food was great. So the conference food, hey, was better than the average conference food. Had some pretty good gumbo and red beans and rice. And yeah, the food at the convention center was actually pretty good. The food outside the convention center was even better. I must say a highlight was going to eat at Koshan. Had a big group out there, and the food was great. So I'm a big fan. Wood-fired oysters, some barbecued pork ribs, some, yeah, I mean, it was all great. So New Orleans was a great food town, and certainly lived up to its expectations. So as a Baltimorean, I was a little suspicious about eating some oysters that weren't from for the Chesapeake Bay, but had some oysters there raw, and they were great as well. So great. So some of the questions that came in as part of the registration were, how do we support a holistic IT roadmap? So I think I did not attend any sessions that specifically talked about connecting, kind of IT operations to, organizational strategy. I do think that, kind of a common theme that came up, in this NTC and previous conferences are really on the critical need for organizations and the IT department, to operate, beyond, the walls of its office. IT doing kind of just IT and reacting is not very effective. So IT that is engaged with leadership, that has a voice at the organization's leadership, is going to be a lot more effective. So instead of IT reacting to requests, IT can be a partner in the broader organization, so that if there are strategic decisions, those are resolved and developed kind of in concert with each other, as opposed to IT kind of running around putting out fires while the strategic plan is kind of somehow disconnected from the day-to-day operations of the organization. So, I think some of the things that were mentioned were, if you're working with an IT partner, making that broader than just, kind of the primary point of contact, to kind of expand throughout the organization to provide a broader perspective. A lot of the folks, the IT folks there that were, the IT directors at nonprofits, mentioned that they had IT working groups. So they would have, maybe monthly meetings, with a broad group of stakeholders at their organization. So not just meeting with the CFO or the executive director, but then also having folks from the programmatic side, from finance there, to talk about IT issues more broadly, so that IT wasn't just kind of siloed in kind of what they did. So I think those are some of the takeaways, and kind of connecting those dots in terms of how do we really support a holistic approach to our IT roadmap. I missed the session that was on IT budgeting and planning, but I was encouraged to hear, that used a model that we kind of picked up and used quite a bit. I think Donnie Shimamoto in years past has talked about this, and Gartner does this, but this idea of kind of run, grow, transform. So there's really 3 buckets in your kind of IT planning. So you've got your run, that's your operational expenses, paying for internet, computer replacement cycle, software licensing, all that good stuff. That's run. So you can defer those expenses, but you're just moving them into future years. So, hey, you got to, if you're not doing it this year, you're just pushing that cost down the road. There are projects, big initiatives to address a specific business goal, and then transform. So what are those things that are really fundamentally alter how your organization works? Like, hey, we're going to implement this new system. It's going to give us the ability to kind of meet this new organizational need. So I think those are some things to connect to that, supporting that holistic IT roadmap. There's a question somebody asked about, hey, what are the new options for cloud file sharing? There weren't, I think, big sessions on SharePoint. So I think SharePoint is certainly the solution that we see most often. I think a lot of organizations are still wrestling, I think, a little bit with how to move into it effectively as part of a file server migration. So SharePoint, I think, is a big player. The other options that we see coming up, and actually I think we're at the conference, were Box. So box.org was there. That is a cloud file sharing platform that I think has benefits in providing a lot of integration with other platforms. So that can be a good kind of connected solution. It also can meet some of those IT governance requirements if you need to check off certain boxes related to how long you're retaining data. It gives you like a rich tool set there, and kind of provides the best of both worlds. You can do some document tagging, but you can still do some traditional folder structure. And then Dropbox. Dropbox tends to still be a good solution for people that are just looking to, hey, we just want to replicate our file folder structure in the cloud. It's pretty straightforward. It's rock solid. It works really well. But at the end of the day, it's just a file sync and share solution. It doesn't give you some of the collaboration options that SharePoint and Box do. So again, understanding what are your requirements, what are you hoping to do? Do you want to be able to collaborate? Do you want to integrate? Do you just want to access your files when you're working from home? That can lead you to some different solutions. Yep, and then thanks for the question about new technologies. I mean, maybe it's not new, but I feel like in at least half the sessions I went to, somebody was talking about Slack. So Slack is that's the hot topic at least now. So for all of you that are in Slack, you guys are ahead of the curve. There was a cool service that was mentioned in one of the sessions I went to called Gather Content. So that's more geared towards if you're doing a website redesign and you're moving from one platform to another, instead of like exporting all your content and editing it and then re-uploading it. This tool called Gather, I think, does what its namesake implies. So it gathers up all the content and then will help you import it into your new website. So I think it's particularly geared to like the WordPress world, but I think that was something that was great to take away. And then another neat thing, that was mentioned that one organization did was use, I think, Giftly as a way to have teams provide, basically micro bonuses to one another. So, they said at their organization, everybody had a small budget. Hey, somebody helps you out on a project, they help you meet the deadline. You can recognize them on the spot right away. A couple of bucks, buy them coffee, something like that. But I thought that was a really neat idea, and for a way to build community and build connections within departments, as opposed to needing all of that recognition to kind of come top down. So great. There's a comment here about Mattermost, which is an open source solution compared to Slack. Kind of going back to the encrypted solution, we talked quite a bit about encrypted communication solutions. So I'd probably put Keybase in that as well. So again, if you're concerned about security and privacy, Keybase seems to be a good option for kind of that team chat collaboration type stuff. And then, Signal was used, actually fairly widely among the folks in the session as a way to provide secure end-to-end text-based communication. So if you need to send somebody a secure message, Signals would be the way to do that. So great. Let's see. And I think another good question, what stood out as major issues which nonprofits are struggling with? Again, I think it's kind of a theme that's existed over the past number of years, but I just think that feeling kind of somewhat under-resourced in terms of being able to invest in certain larger technology capacity solutions. I do think that there has been a shift. I think partly because there's been so many kind of generous donation programs through either Google or Microsoft and Salesforce Foundation and NetSuite and that kind of thing, where the tools are really available. So you as a 5-person nonprofit organization can get Office 365, and you kind of have the same capacity now as a huge enterprise, and all of the security and reporting and features that are available. But I think there still is a really big need around kind of training and effective use of the tools. So that came up kind of again and again as hey, I can get Office 365. How do I get my staff to use it? Came up in our encryption session, like, hey, encryption's great, security is great. Like, I can't get my staff to do X, Y, or Z. So how am I going to ask them to do take this other step, which seems like a big ask. So so I think training, effective use, kind of staff, technology skills and improving those is still kind of has a long way to go. And then I think I think a lot of these solutions, and the presenters, and I'll put myself in here as well, is we kind of presume that you're in an environment where everybody has really great internet connectivity. You've got savvy users, and so for those organizations that there are still places that have not great internet options, so a lot of these cloud solutions may not be as feasible, or again, if you've got folks that aren't as technologically savvy, adopting all these technology solutions are still is still a challenge, and I think it's something for us to kind of continue to be aware of. So again, so thanks for all the great questions, and hopefully you're able to put NTC 19 in your calendar, and we'll get a chance to connect in Portland. So again, thanks for your time today. Again, we have an upcoming webinar with our friends at Build Consulting. That will be Wednesday, May 16th at 4 o'clock Eastern, and we'll be talking about development operations and technology. So thank you very much. Please take a minute to fill out the survey. I appreciate the feedback. So any constructive criticism that you have is certainly welcome. And this is a free resource that we provide and enjoy doing every month. So I hope that you sign up for the next one, and I appreciate the feedback. So thank you and have a great day.